Welcome, Libra, to your Aries New Moon 1 month deep dive forecast for the ascendant, the sun, or the moon. Each lunation has its own unique identity. We can talk more broadly about new moons, being a time to set our intentions, and the host Aries, very much about initiation and passion. But I'm going to share with you on screen, Libra, the exact moment the new moon is forged, but from a purely Libran perspective. Then, by the end of the video, in terms of your energy, work, relationships, and finances, you'll have a clearer understanding of what's upcoming over the next 4 weeks. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundel. A very warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please do so now to help it to continue to thrive. But please also click or tap the bell notification symbol. So on the screen is your event chart. And there's the moon and the sun at 27 degrees and 28. Now, wherever you are in the world, this event does occur on the 17th of April. Now, also on this particular new moon, Chiron, the center, is very, very close to the sun and the moon. And Chiron in Aries is very much about identity. But for you, all these Aries players, which is quite unique in itself, 7 in total, are in your seventh house. Now, the seventh house is often characterized as being about partnership or relationships in modern astrology. I think it's important to know it can also be about our boundaries. It may be where we need to engage with people we don't always find easy. In traditional astrology, it is the sector of open enemies. But let's just widen the perspective here because it's the first new moon for 8 that's not at 28 degrees. So we're breaking that unique series of synchronicity. And also, Chiron doesn't have an even ecliptic. For example, it only spends about 1 1/3 years in your zodiac sign, whereas in Aries it spends the longest time, and it's been here full time since March 2019. Now it's going to be making its way for 4 months in the middle of June into Taurus this year before returning to Aries and back into Taurus next year from April. So it is near the end of its overall journey. Its total circuit is 50 years. But Aries energy is very much about who we are. If it is to do with that identity. So how does your identity feel in terms of your connections to others, which is the seventh house? If they're in good form, things are well balanced, you feel heard, seen, and respected, the chances are some of those alliances can strengthen over the next month. You can also, if you're single, set your intentions to bring someone dynamically into your world. But we also need to be mindful that Neptune is right on the seventh house cusp, also known as the descendant, just as important as the ascendant, the midheaven or the IC, but gets very little coverage, particularly on YouTube. The descendant is about that connection. And having Neptune hovering right on that seventh house cusp, in fact, it's the planet which is nearest to any angle in terms of this whole sign chart, suggesting it's going to be very important to try to peer through the mist that Neptune can create. So it may be that you will connect to someone who has some kind of mystical, healing, or enchanting energy, but are they for real? Now, Mercury is also pretty close. Now, Mercury in the seventh house stepped out as it has through a dreary 10-week journey through Pisces, which was really challenging. It's now in that fiery Aries where it can be more opinionated, but for you, it's asking you to sharpen up your listening skills. Now, often Librans can be very skilled at listening to other people, but it is very close to Neptune. So even if you are attuned to other people, it's going to be important to try to pick up some of their more subtle messages. But if you've got something to say, it needs to be well structured. Guess what? Saturn, the planet of limitation, is in that seventh house for the next 2 years. And for the first time at the end of this week, for 28 years, Mars and Saturn come into an exact conjunction in Aries. And the significance of that for you personally around relationships cannot be underestimated. So If you are feeling that one tie is edging towards an end, this can be a very symbolic time. But remember, through that ending can come a rebirth. And in the eighth house, very much to do with that strand, is Venus, your ruler. But just going back to this connection between Mars and Saturn, the very powerful part of it is Mars can be very assertive in the seventh house, but it can help you to structure what you will or will not accept from other people. So you can firm up your boundaries in a constructive way. So if you feel, for example, that your life is a lot of give to other people, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's even with the people you live with, flatmate, family members or whoever. This is asking you to be a bit steelier. Doesn't mean to say you should lose your compassion, but just a bit firmer on those boundaries to make sure that you don't end up feeling almost invisible. And Neptune on the seventh house does hold a risk of that. So we can be too much of a good egg in life. And therefore, if you do feel that something is essentially out of balance, a time to address that. But if you are needing to compete at work, in your business, uh, really be conscious of who's not necessarily in your corner. There is some energies here which can help you to be tougher. And remember, you're a cardinal sign, Libra. It is within you if you get fired up enough. And obviously, the fiery energy of the sign of Aries can help you to do that. Just one other point, the moon and the sun in their coalition are in the last 10 degrees of a sign the sun is exalted in, loves being in Aries, second only to Leo, but that's sub-ruled by the buoyant energies of Jupiter. So if you are collaborating with people who do get you, who do appreciate you, who are just as thoughtful as you are, maybe not in exactly the same ways, there is the potential for an improvement. And for example, if you're getting to know someone at the moment that you really like, the desire of Pluto in the fifth house of romance in a link to Mars, so you've got the two rulers of Scorpio in an exact alliance in a very constructive way, means that if in the past you have found it a little more testing to make that first move, Mars can be very daring and step into opportunities around connections with others, not just intimately. That aspect can give you a lot of drive at the present time. But let's go back to Chiron. Chiron gets characterized very much about the wound we can never heal. I think there is some truth in that however much we work on understanding Chiron, it can still be very powerful. But Chiron was an astrologer, he was a herbalist in terms of the myth, and obviously he got the wound that never healed. But he was still innately wise. And if you are someone who works in counseling, you're a psychic, you have some kind of public facing role, Chiron suggests that that could be your superpower. So, as much as we can get very focused on where Chiron can show up vulnerabilities, it can be a huge strength. Now, of course, it may not be where you have Chiron in your natal chart, but because we have this symbolic time of Neptune in the sign of Aries, we had the brief visit of 6 months last year, broadly for the first time in about 149 years. And then Saturn back in the sign after the 3 months and the week last year, broadly for the first time in 28 years. That's really important because they're very different, but they're very potent. Neptune can be about our idealism, Saturn can be about realism, but it can also be to do with fate and karma. So if you're going through the cycle of life around relationships and you don't feel that you're getting the kind of connections you really want, think back to about 7 1/3 years ago, or to 14 1/2 years ago, or go back to about 21 3/4 years ago, or all the way back to 28 years ago. And through that period of time, if you're older, you will be able to see when there has been an angle between the moving Saturn and what we're experiencing now. That may have been times of big transformation, possibly painfully, possibly very constructively. So don't see Chiron as just being a wound, it is a potential too. So what about Venus, Libra? Well, she's in a stunning link to Jupiter. If you are wanting to forge that contract and earn more money, that's a very fortunate alliance. The two planets, the two benefics, are in a stunning connection. Jupiter right at the top of your chart in your sector of work and ambition. Pluto in its home sign of Taurus beyond your sign. Eighth house can be about long-term finance. Your ability to think outside the box around resources is emphasized with Venus and Uranus in a broadish conjunction, 7 degrees. Natally, that would definitely be considered. In these type of charts, I usually try to keep it to within about 3 degrees, but it is there as a hint. And also the node. The node has been in the sign of Pisces and will be through the true north node through to the end of July this year. But that suggests all the sacrifice you've been putting in over the last few years with Saturn in that part of your chart. And earlier this year, when we had the Pisces stellium, can come back to you, but you need to know your worth. And that's very much an Aries energy. Be strong in your identity, be strong in your ego. So if you're connecting to people, doesn't mean to say you have to dominate them, but just so you feel respected. And that's really terribly important for Libra people, especially after the crushing Pluto and Capricorn years. Whether you're an ascendant like me or a sun, those years from 2008 through till November 2024, with the interlude into Aquarius for 10 or 11 weeks in 23 and the first half of 24, it's possible that you did through that period go through some very, very powerful disappointments emotionally. So all that knowledge you've gained, you can deploy it through this event. So I think it's exciting if you're single, whether you're involved, whether you're looking for a new job. I'm going to recap it all shortly, but just to say, if you want to work with natal astrology in this way, I've reduced the price of my horoscope reports. You can now get 3 for the price of 1. You buy the character analysis, you get a 12 months transit 3, but also your Draconic Soul Karmic chart too. Please see the link below. I'm doing this because I'm really passionate about people learning more about astrology, but most of all, learning about your own unique life journey. But also, I do appreciate that many people are feeling the pinch. If you've yet to watch your Uranus in Gemini 84-year cycle video, it's on the screen. If you've yet to watch your April deep dive monthly forecast Libra, that's on the screen. And if you'd like to work with me one-to-one, please check out my testimonials below. And if you'd like to get your free daily horoscope fired to your device each morning, if you've yet to subscribe, please do that below and get your celestial pit stop to read early each day. To summarize, if a relationship is going well, this is a new moon that can support that. If you do have some pain about your value in relationships or past hurtful connections have left such a mark that it's stopping you from really going for it, this is an opportunity to think again. But part of it is understanding your own power. Relationships aren't being about being very good all the time to other people. They're about knowing who we are and balancing in a matching way a connection with someone where we can be complementary. See that as your mission. If you are at work needing to work collaboratively with other people, there's a lot to like here, but do be clear about your expectations. Financially, I really like this chart. And I think if you are applying for jobs, your natural charm and diplomacy can stand you in good stead. In terms of your neat energy, the North Node does retain its place in the 6th house. Obviously, looking after ourselves is really important. We all seem to be pulled around in different directions, don't we? Even though we have all this technology and labor saving devices. But I think the best way to preserve your energy is actually sometimes to just say no. Have a great Aries new moon, Libra. Thank you so much for joining me. All the best and goodbye.